Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved and tyranny is erected on its ruins. Republics and limited monarchies derive their strength and vigor from a popular examination into the actions of the magistrates. Benjamin Franklin, U.S. Founding Father.
Pluralism is when a society or any group has a lot of different types of people or groups within it. They could be different religious groups, racial groups, political or ideological groups, but they're all part of one whole. And so you both have people who are different, but you have them all as part of one society. Pluralism is absolutely tied to many of the freedoms that we enjoy: freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Because in a diverse society where you have lots of different groups coming together and none of the groups have absolute power or absolute control over everything, you have to find a way for all of them to coexist and for all of their voices to be included and find home in that diverse society. I think free speech and inclusion are two sides of the same coin. If we want to include people in a society, we have to include their voices. It doesn't mean that we're going to agree with them, because in a diverse society, a pluralistic society, you're never going to agree with everyone. We've got a lot of diverse ideological views, political views, religious, ethnic, racial differences and different views. And so it's just important that everyone has the opportunity to express themselves through freedom of speech, through freedom of expression, through freedom of religion, and that we have a space for that. We include those voices, and we know that even though we won't agree with everyone who's expressing themselves, they have a place to express themselves in a pluralistic society. A lot of people ask about how free speech and cancel culture exist side by side, or how they relate to each other. It's important as we think about freedom of speech, we're not saying that we're giving freedom of speech to people that we agree with only. And we can't cancel or try to silence those views we don't like. We certainly don't have to listen to them, and we certainly don't have to agree with them, but they have to find space in a pluralistic society where there's going to be a lot of different views. Part of the freedom of speech is that we recognize that there are limits on freedom of speech: hate speech or speech that incites violence, and that speech is rightfully limited. But speech that we don't like because we disagree with someone still has a place in a pluralistic society. And what we have to recognize is, as we protect the rights of those who we disagree with to speak, we're also ensuring that they don't have the right to silence us or cancel us as we're expressing views which they may not like. And so it's a contract that we have with others in a society to say, we're going to make that space, protect the freedom of people to express themselves, to speak their minds, and recognize that we won't always agree with each other.
And welcome back Inside the Law. I'm your host, Philip Holloway. Today, we're using our right to free speech to talk about free speech. And the question is, will the courts be relied upon, and can the courts be relied upon to protect our rights of free speech when the government tries to silence us? You know, we live in a very unusual time, because the traditional town square where people have traditionally gone to exercise their right to free speech has been replaced in large part by social media. Social media, being private companies, they take on the mantle of the modern town square. And of course, as you heard in the video, we've got the issues of cancel culture. We've got the issues of silencing people who have voices that maybe we don't agree with. And so the big question is, what are the courts going to do about it? What can the courts do about it? And what will the courts reliably do about it? James Madison, one of the founding fathers of the United States, proposed one of the first drafts of the First Amendment. And that initial draft, in large part, read as follows: "The people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments, and the freedom of the press, as one of the great bulwarks of liberty, shall be inviolable." And I included this part because this is not the actual First Amendment. I'll get to that in a minute. But I thought that was important because Madison refers to this as being the bulwark of liberty. And the First Amendment, it really is that. It's so important that it was put at the top of the list. Amendment number one. There's lots of rights associated with the First Amendment, but the one we're focusing on today primarily is free speech and expression. Now, the final version of the First Amendment, of course, reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, let's drill down on that just a minute, because when the First Amendment reads and it talks about Congress, shall not take any action, that refers to something called, we call it state action in the law. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about a state government. We could be talking about the federal government. We could be talking about a state government and a local government. It could be your city council. It could be your local school board if they won't let you come and say what you want to say. The First Amendment requires something called state action. If you don't have state action, you don't have a First Amendment violation. Only the government can violate your constitutional rights. But what happens when private companies work with the government or at the behest of government? Or what happens if the government pressures or forces or threatens or cajoles private companies into silencing your point of view? Well, this is, one of the things that we do here on Inside the Law is we look at current cases, things that are actually in the news, things that are actually going on to bring you inside the law. And this brings us to the landmark case of Murthy versus Missouri. It's currently pending before the U.S. Supreme Court. It was originally called Missouri versus Biden. The issue in this case is whether the government's challenged conduct, specifically the government leaning on and twisting the arms of social media companies, does that transform the action of these private companies into what we call state action? If a private person is working for, the local police department as a snitch, and the police send that person into your house to search it, just because they're not the actual police, they are actors for the police, and that would satisfy the requirement for state action in the context of the Fourth Amendment. But this is the First Amendment. So if the government is using a social media company to do its bidding, to silence you, and to describe what maybe your opinion is as disinformation in the opinion of the government, does that violate the Constitution? Here's a little bit more about this litigation.
Hello, I'm Senator Eric Schmidt. When I was Missouri's Attorney General, I filed the seminal lawsuit Missouri versus Biden, which is now called Murthy versus Missouri. It's going to be heard in the United States Supreme Court on Monday, and it's the biggest free speech case in American history, pitting the government against the people. At the core of the lawsuit is the idea that the federal government can't outsource censorship to social media companies to trample on American speech, which is exactly what they were doing. At the behest of some of the highest-ranking government officials in the country, the biggest social media companies in the world censored speech on topics like the lab leak theory, the Hunter Biden laptop story, the origins of COVID, the efficacy of masks, and much, much more. The discovery that came out in that case is shocking, to say the least. It shows it wasn't just one or two officials that were working with social media companies to censor American voices. It was a leviathan of officials and agencies, more appropriately dubbed a vast censorship enterprise. This case cuts at the very core of what it means to be an American and what we believe in this country. The federal government should not be censoring American speech. And they don't get to end run around the Constitution by having social media platforms do it for them. It's my hope that the Supreme Court will side with Missouri, Louisiana, and the entire country and affirm the district court's injunction to halt this censorship. And know this, I will always fight to protect your First Amendment rights.
And joining us here on Inside the Law is someone else who knows how to fight for First Amendment rights. Welcome to my friend, Attorney Julie Hamill of the California Policy Center. Julie, good afternoon.
Hello, Phil. How are you?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for coming in and taking some of your Sunday to share with us your your knowledge, your experience, and eventually we're going to talk about your own individual legal battle that you have taken on there in Southern California. But first, you and I were talking offline, and you know a lot about this Murthy case, Murthy versus Missouri, and some of the things that were uncovered in this case and sort of what the status is. So go ahead and let us know what's the latest, what's going on, and what is this case about?
Okay, and I will tell you, I did just mention this before we came on. I just listened to a panel of legal experts who were on both sides of this issue in the Murthy v. Missouri case, and it was very depressing. And so I am not optimistic about where this case is headed, but I'm going to try to be positive for today. So Murthy v. Missouri had oral arguments before the United States Supreme Court last month, and I did not love the questions that came from the United States Supreme Court justices. I did not love the commentary that came from them. I'll get to that later. But in a nutshell, essentially what Murthy v. Missouri is about is during COVID, the government, various levels of the federal government, so people from the FBI, from CISA, from the presidential administration, were reaching out to the highest levels of these digital platform technology companies. So they were going after Meta, Twitter, now X, YouTube, all of the main social media companies that we rely on as Americans to get our information. And they were saying, you are putting people's lives at risk. You are putting election integrity and democracy at risk by
Let me pause you
allowing.
for a second. Let me
Sure.
just so how were they being the government? How were they communicating with the big tech social media platforms? Were they having meetings? Was this on the phone? How were they going about this very bizarre type of communication?
There were a number of different ways. So one example was this communication was coming. This is the least offensive, I think, in my opinion, is Jen Psaki speaking during a press conference saying, we're going to come for Section 230. That was public. That's in my opinion, that was the least offensive.
Well, what is Section 230? So a lot of some folks are laypersons here that might be watching. Tell us what Section 230 is.
Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act insulates these digital media companies from liability for what is posted on their platforms. And it is incredibly valuable to them, and they do not want to lose this protection. And so the Democratic administration and certain Congress people, when they had the majority, were threatening, and they were having hearings. Like Adam Schiff would have hearings at the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence with these digital platforms, talking about how they could reform Section 230 to better protect the public. And the digital platform these companies were trying to do everything they could to appease the government to avoid having this protection removed, because
so we got, let me make sure I get this right. So we've got a benefit that is provided to social media companies in the form of Section 230, which shields them from liability. So they don't want to lose that shield from liability, because Congress giveth, Congress can taketh away, right? So
exactly.
They don't want to lose this valuable protection. So are you telling us that the government is essentially threatening them with taking away that legal protection if they don't do what the government wants them to do?
That's exactly right. And in some cases, like when Jen Psaki was saying this during a public press conference, that was public. In other cases, there were frequent meetings, regular meetings that were being held between the leaders of these tech companies and these government agency heads. There were emails exchanged. There were phone calls exchanged. Discovery obviously revealed the email communications, and sometimes the threats were overt, and other times the threats were not so overt, where I believe it was the Fifth Circuit where one of the judges or the justices said, it's a nice looking platform you have there. It would be a shame if anything happened to it. So there's like, I'm going to come remove your Section 230 protections and put you at all of this financial risk. It was more like, we're really concerned you're putting the American public at risk by allowing people to discuss, COVID isn't as bad as the government is saying. Oh, COVID vaccines might be causing harm in some cases. You're not allowed to, if you keep letting people say that. You're putting the American public at risk. You're spreading disinformation. It would be a real shame if you kept doing that, because then
Well,
we
let's
have
talk
to do
about that for a
something
second. So wait a minute. So disinformation. I mean, who is it that gets to decide what is and what is not disinformation? Because
the government.
look, I mean, I read the quote from James Madison at the very beginning of this, and he talks about the people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments, and and that's one of the great bulwarks of liberty, and that it shall not be violated. So, what the First Amendment is about. It's about the right to have your own opinion, even if it's different from the government. Right? Am I getting this wrong? But that's what my understanding is of what the First Amendment is supposed to mean, right? Because
Mine too.
it's what is disinformation is a matter of, maybe it's your opinion. We're not going to turn this into a show about whether masks work or whether the vaccine works, but we saw this enormous censorship effort come in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, when it's almost like the government was using that as an excuse, saying this is the time that we're going to step on people's voices. We're going to use this as the emergency basis, basically, to suppress free speech.
Exactly. And so what was revealed in Murthy v. Missouri is that under the auspices of, we're protecting the public, we're keeping people safe, we're going to eliminate all of this content that conflicts with the CDC's official pronouncements. And what was uncovered in Murthy v. Missouri is the government actually had the digital platforms censor true speech that was true, but came out against, it happened to be in conflict with whatever the CDC was saying at the time. And so it seems to me that since 2020, there's been an asterisk added to the First Amendment that says the government is free to censor you if your speech conflicts with public health guidance during a public health emergency, unfortunately.
So, all right. So what happened when they filed this lawsuit? Did they have any initial success with the judge, the first judge to hear this in the trial court level?
Yes. So in the Murthy v. Missouri case, started out as Missouri v. Biden. They prevailed at the district court level. The district court issued a very wide-ranging injunction prohibiting the government from doing the things that it was accused of doing. So attempting to influence, control. I can't remember all of the language that was in the injunction, but it was a number of things like influencing, coercing, taking action to influence the decisions of a digital media platform to censor free speech. The Fifth Circuit on appeal limited that injunction slightly, but upheld it and issued a very detailed, thorough analysis. I think it was 85 pages long. And then that went up to the United States Supreme Court. And as I just mentioned earlier, the oral arguments were last month. And right. I am not confident in where we're headed with the ultimate.
Well, I hope you're wrong. And look, I mean, lawyers, we always assume the worst. I know I do. When you've got a jury out or you make an oral argument, you got a judge waiting to decide something, we always assume, oh my God, that was terrible. We've lost. I hope for the sake of all of us that you're wrong about that. But it sounds to me like you've got the trial court and also the Court of Appeals in this case have all, they've both said that there was government censorship, and at least the judges in the Fifth Circuit, as well as the trial judge, those judges were all satisfied that these private companies were in fact acting as state actors to satisfy that legal requirement, because as we mentioned, only the government can violate your rights. So in order for this to be a First Amendment violation, the social media, the big tech companies would have to be essentially acting in the place of the government. So it sounds like the lower courts were satisfied that there was enough here. Am I right?
Yes, yes. But one of the reasons I am so concerned has to do with spontaneous comments that came from Justice Kagan and Justice Kavanaugh. And they were discussing, the government has a First Amendment right to persuade media companies and the public to do certain things. And they were saying, we both have experience badgering the media to not publish stories or to change the way that they're talking about an issue. We both did that when we worked for the government. And when they said that, my heart sank because they believe, based on their experience, most of these Supreme Court justices were government lawyers before they sat on the Supreme Court. And in their experience working for the government, they became used to this practice of the government controlling how the media talks about issues, which is hugely problematic and completely runs contrary to what the purpose is of our First Amendment.
Well, I certainly hope that you're wrong. And, look, I don't dispute that. I mean, I guess if you're, somebody is a staffer at the White House or anywhere else, I mean, I guess it's okay for you to ask or to suggest, but to use threats to say we're going to take away legal protection at that point, haven't you crossed the line? I mean, to satisfy, Justice Kagan's point that she, I guess, was trying to make, when you threaten them with taking some legal action against them if they don't do what you want them to do. I mean, I think that's got to be a little bit different than simply making a simple request.
Yeah, and that's the crux of the entire argument at the Supreme Court. It's whether or not these actions reach the level of significant encouragement or coercion. And there's a test set forth by the Fifth Circuit. And I think if the Supreme Court rules on the merits and doesn't kick this on standing, which I kind of hope that it does at this point, if they rule on the merits, perhaps we'll see a new test, or perhaps they will use one of the tests that already exists, but it has to reach the level of significant encouragement or coercion. But one of the problems there is that it's very rare for someone to overtly threaten. Usually when these people are slick, these communications directors for congressmen and for presidential administrations, they're not stupid people. They're not going to outwardly threaten people. They're going to imply and intimate threats. And so I think it's a very difficult, slippery slope. And I really personally don't believe that our government should be able to control the way stories are presented on social media, in traditional media, in books. It seems to run completely contrary to the idea of free speech.
No, absolutely. The government should not in any way be able to control this. And so, one of the things that has always troubled me is now that we've got all these, nobody goes onto the town square, the literal town square, more or less, to engage in free speech. Almost all of it is done online. Of course, you do have protests, and you've got, you do have those sorts of things going on. But by and large, I think most of it is done right here, like we're doing right now. And it's on social media. It's on Facebook. It's on X. It used to be Twitter. It's on Instagram. You name it. This is where people go to tell you what they think, even if what they think, if what they think might be offensive to you or disagreeable to you, you simply can just ignore it, or you can say what you want in response to that. So these social media companies have become the virtual town square, and they do it for profit. They're in the business of making money. So it seems to me that if, as a business venture, you decide that your company is going to become the new virtual town square, that you are obligated to do the things the government traditionally or used to do, which was to protect the rights of people to engage in free speech. And of course, I'm not talking about the threats of violence and all that. There are certain limits on what you can say. But it seems to me that if you're going to create the virtual town square, you also have to provide people with the same degree of protection for, even unpopular opinions that traditionally the government was here to protect, and courts would protect. We see we've all heard, okay, I don't agree with what you say, but I 100% support your right to say it. And I wonder what happened to that mindset, because that used to be the prevailing mindset in America. And it was also the prevailing mindset of judges. And I want to know if you can help us understand where that changed. Where did the government and where did the judges, change? Where did the judges start becoming less reliable on free speech?
God, I mean, I think it has to do with digital technology, number one, because this is a new kind of forum and we don't have case law going back to the founding of our country dealing with how to approach regulating speech in a digital forum. So that's a new concept. Secondly, I think the fear around the pandemic, the fear around COVID really shifted a lot of the way that judges, at least I'm in California, so I live in the land of crazyville. You're in Georgia.
Well, I mean, this is literally night and day difference out there. And we're going to get to California. I promise you, you got a lot to say. We got a lot to say about California. But that's, it's almost like a different communism type level there.
Yes, it is. It's scary. So I think it's two things. I think and I wrote about this in my briefs in my case in the County of Los Angeles. There's a quote from Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas talking about how there's not a lot of precedent in the area of digital technology and free speech. And he sort of telegraphed that the Supreme Court would be coming out with more analysis on how to deal with these issues. And so I was hoping that this Murthy v. Missouri case would be that opportunity where we would get more of an analysis and guidance from the United States Supreme Court. But based on how that argument went, now I'm hoping that perhaps this will just be something that they don't provide analysis on and say that there's a standing problem.
So you're basically, what you're saying then is you're saying you hope that instead of a decision that's a bad decision, that's hurtful, right, to those of us who actually support the First Amendment and free speech, you'd rather them not have a decision at all and say that there's no standing, and explain for the non-lawyers watching now or who watch the replay, explain what standing means and why someone might or might not have standing to bring a lawsuit.
Yeah, so Article 3 standing is required in federal court. And so they have, and I don't, I'm not, I actually practice mostly in state court, so I'm not an expert on standing there, because standing is much easier to make in a state court action. But they have to show that there's a redressable injury that is tied directly to the conduct of the government. And in this case, the government made arguments that it was too attenuated, that it cannot be traced to the government. I don't agree with that, but there is always a chance that the Supreme Court sort of kicks something on standing grounds, and it's the easy way out. So,
so it's better to have no decision on this than a bad decision, and come back another time when we've got a stronger case. I certainly understand that. But look, we're going to get to your case in California here in just a second. But before we move on to that, I want to wrap this up on the Murthy case. Now, so your prediction was that you don't think it's going to go well for the plaintiffs in this case, but and you mentioned Justice Kagan. And, and you're right, the fact that these people are government lawyers for their entire careers, it has to, at some point, look, judges are generally what I call statists anyway, because once they become a judge, now you're part of the government, right? So It's sometimes very difficult for judges to separate themselves ideologically from the government mentality. But lest I digress, we've got Justice Kagan, Sotomayor. You're going to have the liberals that we know can be counted on not to rule in favor of these plaintiffs, but we've also got some that might be more friendly, right? So how can we be sure we're not going to have like maybe a 5-4 decision that would be, in support of the plaintiffs, and that would basically be telling the government you can't do this stuff?
I don't see it happening based on what I heard. I could be wrong. I think we'll get favorable words from Gorsuch, possibly Roberts. It was interesting when Kavanaugh and Kagan were talking about their experience badgering the media into covering stories the way they wanted them covered when they worked for the government. Justice Roberts says, just to be clear, I've never done that. So I think he recognized that that's not a great look. I don't personally have faith in a positive outcome.
Well, I hope you're wrong.
Me too.
And look, you and I, we're friends, and we can agree to disagree. I think it's going to be a good ruling. I think there's going to be standing, and I think the government is going to get shut down on this. I'm more optimistic than you are, but generally speaking, I too don't usually trust that courts are going to protect us. I told people, during the COVID pandemic, a lot of people were like, we've got to get, we got to get the kids in school. We got to get all these things done. And people were asking me, what kind of lawsuits can we file? And I tried to tell people, litigation is not a good solution to this. Litigation is not the kind of thing that it's like a last resort, right?
Exactly.
It's just the kind of thing that we can't count on judges to do what needs to be done in the area of personal liberty. Now, with that being said, I want to take just a minute to recognize and thank all the people that are here in the live chat right now. And particularly, we've got a lot of new members, and I've shared some of these on screen. I really appreciate this support. This is what, and see, you've got a retired Senior Chief Petty Officer from the Navy just gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much, Senior Chief. One of my favorite folks in here. So we've got some gifted memberships, and of course the supers. Thank you. This helps me grow the channel. It helps me, provide, like, I've got a new background back here. These are the kinds of things that your support goes for, and I really, really appreciate it. This channel is doing much. It's just doing phenomenal, and I really am humbled by all of your support. So thank you all very much. And yes, please do hit the like button. Now, Julie is, as we mentioned, she's joining us from California, and she's in Los Angeles, not Lower Alabama, but LA, Los Angeles. Now, she has got some personal experience with some litigation out there against these folks. Anybody who's been following the news, she's laughing because Barbara Ferrer just looks so hit. I mean, just look anyway. It's just funny. But let's see if we can drill down on this a little bit. So we've got Barbara Ferrer and Adam Schiff versus freedom of speech in Los Angeles County. I mean, just doesn't she look so smart? All right. We've got, all right, Los Angeles County Director of Public Health Barbara Ferrer leveraged relationships with Representative Adam Schiff in an effort to bully Twitter into silencing critics of her universal mask mandate. This is the same kind of crap that was at issue in the Murthy case, right? This is the government leaning on Twitter. In this case, though, it's LA County DPH Director Barbara Ferrer and Congressman Adam Schiff bullying Twitter into silencing critics of the mask mandate. It says Schiff's role, part of her broader campaign to suppress her critics, I have a feeling that you might be one of those, is described in a remarkable July 26, and this is going to be 2023, court filing by attorney Julie Hamill of the Alliance of Los Angeles County Parents. The Alliance is suing the Department of Public Health and others, including Ferrer, for her First Amendment violations. A trial is set for October 16th. Now, before we get to the trial, let me play just one quick video with some background on this.
A chance to talk with Dr. Ferrer today. We're going to hear from her in just. But first, one of her critics, a local attorney who represents hundreds of parents, she says forcing kids to wear masks is just cruel. And she says if the county goes through with this indoor mask mandate again, she will file a lawsuit. From parents to the public health director, more controversy over LA County's possible return to an indoor mask mandate.
Really shock and disbelief, especially in light of the fact that the rest of the world seems to be moving on.
Attorney Julie Hamill, representing the Alliance of LA County Parents, just sent a 3-page letter to the Board of Supervisors, warning that she plans to file a lawsuit if the county returns to the mandate that would force LA school children to wear masks indoors. Hamill is asking the Board of Supervisors to step in and take some power away from County Public Health Director Dr. Barbara Ferrer.
They can put a check on Barbara Ferrer's power. They are not required to implement whatever policies she recommends.
The outrage comes as Ferrer defends her failure to disclose that her daughter co-authored a study that the CDC and local officials have used to support masking in schools. Jennifer LeVar, the editor of RedState.com, a conservative website, reported on what she believes is Ferrer's conflict of interest.
When it comes to affect policy, when it comes to affect children, that needs to be known. People can make their own judgment.
At the public health briefing today, going back to the criticism that you did not disclose, I questioned Dr. Ferrer about a possible conflict of interest.
I did not participate in this project, so I did not disclose anything because I wasn't part of this research study at all. Had nothing to do with it.
So you don't believe that the public had the right to know to maintain your credibility with the public?
No, I don't. I think the public knows what they need to know.
Dr. Ferrer says the public needs to look at the numbers that do show a summer surge of COVID cases and maintains a return to indoor masking could be just 8 days away. It's not just parents. Local business owners also concerned about how a return to an indoor mask mandate would affect their customers and their business. By the way, that mask mandate set to begin July 29th. We're on track. Live in Hollywood, I'm Sandra Mitchell, KTLA 5 News. Sharon Micah, back to you.
All right, Sandra, thank you.
All right. Well, Julie, I can't wait for you to talk about the trial. So look, so you and I have known each other, and I lived sort of this journey, not with you, but sort of vicariously through you. So I know what happened. And let me just say that you are one of my personal heroes for taking on this fight and taking it to Dr. Ferrer and, the Department of Public Health in Los Angeles. So with that said, tell us about that case and tell us what happened.
Thank you very much for the kind words, and thank you for your support. I think being able to connect with people like you and our group of underground fighters was a huge source of strength. And I don't know if I would have been able to do this without your support. To put this in context, the County of Los Angeles has 10.3 million residents. So that is a lot of people under the control of one woman, one unelected bureaucrat. And by July of 2022, we were essentially 2.5 years beyond the beginning of the pandemic. And by that time, a lot more information was available. And we had local county employed physicians, the physicians who are employed by the Department of Health Services within the county, were coming out and they were having these town hall meetings that somebody leaked to the public. Thank God, because without them, I don't know if we could have done this. But in those town halls, these expert physicians who are epidemiologists, they were experts in their field, they are telling the staff,
No. They were disinformation peddlers,
No, not these people. These are the health
Right.
services. These are the actual doctors. This is not Ferrer. This is the Department of Health Services.
Disagrees with Ferrer or the government as a peddler of disinformation. Isn't that how it works?
That is what ended up happening here. So these doctors, they don't know that this is going to go viral. They don't know the public is going to see this stuff. So in these town halls, they are telling their staff, these are staffers within the hospitals, nurses, doctors. They're saying the press is blowing COVID up. It is not what they're saying it is. Barbara Ferrer's office keeps putting out these messages that, COVID's killing people and putting people in the hospital. We have not seen a hospitalization due to COVID for months. There's nobody in ICU. There's nobody in the hospital due to COVID right now. So from a hospitalization due to COVID perspective, there's no reason to be concerned. They're saying this in black and white in July of 2022. I get the leaked video. I shared it on Twitter. You probably liked it, shared it. So this gets out, and there are members of the media who are also journalists with integrity are so critical to freedom in this country. And we're severely lacking, but there were a handful of them in Los Angeles. Jennifer Van Laar, who was in that clip, Marla Tellez, who's with our local Fox affiliate here. Bill Malugin was local at the time. Now he's on national Fox, covering the border and doing amazing work. These people have so much integrity, and they would not give up. And so Marla and Sandra Mitchell from KTLA, who you just saw in that clip, start questioning Ferrer. They're saying, hold on, we just saw this clip from doctors within the county who are saying there's no need to be concerned from a hospitalization due to COVID perspective. Meanwhile, you're saying you're about to issue another mandate because COVID is so deadly and dangerous and the community levels are so high and the hospitalization rates are high. And that's what you're basing your mandate on. And she would, go on to these 10-minute diatribes of deflection, talking about the need to pursue equity and protect, the most vulnerable people from COVID. And so we have to do this. The numbers are so high, blah, blah, blah. So as you said, litigation is a last resort. I didn't want to do this. I didn't have the resources to do
wait a
it.
minute. You've got a giant staff. You've got, lots of lawyers working for you. You've got unlimited resources to go after and tackle LA County. What was the problem here?
So at the time, I was working from my house. I had a very small part-time law practice. I had 3 little kids who, the youngest was 9 months when COVID started. So I did not have the ability to do this. And so I was working with all of these parents trying to push, public relations campaigns, trying to contact our board of supervisors repeatedly. And I was getting responses from the animal control deputy for my supervisor, not from the actual supervisor. Long story short, none of these efforts were working. Not media pushback wasn't working. Nothing was working. They wanted control over the population. A lot of that was being pushed by the teachers union, unfortunately.
We could do an entire show on the teachers union, but anyway, if you mention them again, you're going to trigger me. So
okay.
Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I get when you mention teachers unions in California, it makes me crazy. Go ahead.
Me too. And I ran for my school board and won.
Yep, you did. Congratulations, by the way. Yep.
Thank you. So anyway, finally, my middle son was really struggling. He had a speech delay, and he was being required to wear a dang mask the entire time he was at school, when he was playing basketball outside. And I fought back at that point in 2022 because I couldn't handle it anymore. And in Los Angeles, that made me a social pariah. I was the only person who was saying anything to fight back against this obvious madness. And I was tired of it. I wanted to move. I wanted to leave. I'd been to Florida. I went to my sister-in-law's bachelorette party in Miami in 2021, and I saw people were living normal. They were living normal lives, and it wasn't mass death. I knew it was possible. And so coming back to LA and just seeing how people were living made me insane. And ultimately, the Super Bowl rolled around in 22. And that was at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. And so we did a press conference, and we were saying, look, you are masking our children indoors and outside 8 hours a day. Because you're saying COVID's so deadly, but you're going to bring 75,000 people together into this stadium to watch the Super Bowl. And so we thought about filing a lawsuit to prevent the Super Bowl from going forward on this. And we realized
probably would have, that would have been the PR thing that would have been a
exactly.
problem. I mean, I understand, believe me, I understand but your instincts were correct. That probably was not the hill to die on.
No, I have the complaint somewhere. I can send it to you. But we decided that would be a terrible PR strategy. So we didn't. We held off. And then in July of 2022, that was 5 months later after the Super Bowl, when Ferrer comes out and says, COVID's killing everybody, everybody's hospitalized, blah, 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 we got to do this. And she wasn't letting up. So then we decided to filed July 26th of 2022. In that first iteration of the petition for writ of mandate, said it only challenged these arbitrary and capricious mandates.
All right, let me pause you for a second. So the petition for a writ of mandate, or it might be called a writ of mandamus, what that is, folks, is basically you file a lawsuit and you're asking a judge to order a government official to do something specific. So you're asking a judge to order Ferrer to cancel her plans to mask up the kids, essentially. So that's what the writ of mandamus is. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to just sort of point that out for people who might not understand the legal jargon, but go ahead.
Yeah, so we filed this petition for writ of mandate, and it's only limited to challenging these arbitrary and capricious mandates for a number of reasons, including, she's inflating the numbers, she's not using scientific reality, all this stuff that we put into the initial petition. And so we filed that on the 26th. On July 30th, they announced that they're not going to move forward with the mandate. And on that same day, they shut off all of the public comments that were underneath the posts by the Department of Public Health. So they closed off all public comments on Meta, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So no one could respond to their official posts anymore.
All right, let me pause you there, because we're going to go back to the First Amendment, which says that part of what your First Amendment right is, and it does apply to California. Gavin Newsom doesn't understand that, but it does apply to all the states in the union, California still being one of them, apparently. One of the rights that you have is to petition the government for redress of grievance. And that means you get to comment on their Facebook post, among other things.
Well, not according to our judge, but technically, I mean, one, I made the argument, yes. And the right to free speech includes the right to receive information. And the information being shared in these replies was so important because those links to the town halls that I was mentioning earlier from the actual medical doctors within the county, those videos were being posted underneath the posts by the Department of Public Health. So you'd see a post from Ferrer saying, this is how scary COVID is. These are what the numbers are. And then right underneath, you get these town hall videos where these doctors employed by the county are completely contradicting everything she's saying. And it was a really important, effective tool to educate people on what was going on, because at that point, most people in Los Angeles didn't realize that the stuff coming out of Ferrer's office was BS. It was total BS, inflated, designed to scare people, which is evil. I mean, it was so evil. So they shut off public comment. And then one of the members of our group, the Alliance of Los Angeles County Parents, created this alt account. So it was an alternate account that was created solely for the purpose of quote tweeting every post by the Department of Public Health, so that comments could be left open and people could discuss. It was a centralized place for discussion where people could talk about what the health order said, what the reality was, what the medical doctors were actually saying, and there could be strategy to attack them. And so this is exactly what happened in this alt account. And then that alt account was shut down repeatedly.
Who shut it down?
Great question. So we
Adam Schiff?
suspected. Yes. So we suspected, and we were later proven correct in discovery, that this account was shut down at the behest of the county. And
Barbara Ferrer.
Well,
she just looks guilty to me.
Barbara Ferrer is a political animal. Her background is very interesting. Yeah. So she hired this guy named Brett Morrow. Brett Morrow came to us from Adam Schiff's office. Brett Morrow was hired by Ferrer out of Schiff's office to be the communications director for the County Department of Public Health. And he saw his duties as including monitoring all of the public commentary that was surrounding the messaging out of the Department of Public Health, and ensuring that nothing in conflict with the department's official pronouncements was getting out. And so what Brett did is he went to his buddy, and I think they might be related, this guy, Patrick Morrow Boland, who was Adam Schiff's chief of staff, and his Brett's buddy, colleague, relative, whatever. We have text messages between them, or Brett reaches out and says, hey, we're having some problems with opposition on Twitter to our mask mandate that we want to impose. Can you introduce me to your Twitter contact? So Patrick Morrow Boland, who, mind you, at the time was chief of staff for Adam Schiff, who was the then chair of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. As the chair, he had independent authority to subpoena and to initiate investigations. And he was using...
So he could throw his weight around
exactly
and bully them to doing Barbara Ferrer's bidding, right?
Exactly.
Is that where this is going? All right.
Yes.
Yes.
So, so then Patrick Boland connects Brett Morrow, the communications guy for the Department of Public Health, with this woman named Lauren Culbertson. And if you've been following the Twitter files, if you've been following Murthy v. Missouri, you recognize the name because Lauren Culbertson was the head of U.S. public policy for Twitter. That's pretty top level executive at Twitter. And then we have a series of emails that show Brett going directly to Lauren and copying Mr. Boland, the chief of staff for Adam Schiff. And you see his email to Lauren Culbertson, and he says, hey, I used to work with Adam Schiff, and Adam Schiff's chief of staff, Patrick Boland, recommended that I reach out to you. We need your help. Opponents are posting the following misinformation about...
In his opinion.
Oh.
Well, but see, that's the thing. They say misinformation, right? But they totally ignore all the people who, if they hadn't shut off comments, they would hear people that had, a different take on it. So this just burns my ass, because look, when people say, okay, you got, this is disinformation, that's just your opinion.
It's anything.
I mean, and I've got my opinion, you got yours. Welcome to the club, but don't say it's, a matter of gospel fact if you're just simply saying that in your opinion, this is disinformation. And it's gotten to the point where all you got to do is have the government say this is disinformation, and the media just runs with it. They just assume that it is disinformation, and they adopt it hook, line, and sinker, and they run with it. And if you have an opinion or a thought or an inkling of an idea different than what Adam Schiff or the government wants you to have, you're a disinformation peddler. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had a rant.
No, you're exactly right. And it's good that you're ranting, because I've been ranting about this for years and just like screaming into the wind. So it's therapeutic for me to have this discussion with you right now. So anyway, just the stuff. And if you want to look at this, the documents are still up on the website. It's laparents.org, laparents.org. I put all the case documents up there so people can read them, because I want the public to know the government is controlling what you get to read on the internet. They are controlling it. And so these emails were like, people are calling Barbara Ferrer a fake doctor. It's misinformation. They're saying that mask mandates don't work. They're saying this, they're saying that. And it was such petty nonsense. And he was talking about local journalists, like a local radio personality. He tried to have him deplatformed. And then ultimately we see he tries to go after, or he does go after the alt account. And he says, can this be taken down? Can this be taken down? Just in black and white. And then
cancel. It's just cancel. It's just, you say something they don't like and they just want to just deplatform you, just cancel you. Like your opinion just doesn't matter. It's like, James Madison is, turning over in his grave.
Well, let me get to a point that I don't want to forget to talk about this, and then we can get back to this stuff. But I have to be careful how I talk about this because I've been threatened personally with a lawsuit from Twitter, unfortunately. So we subpoenaed documents from X Corp, formerly Twitter, and Meta. They refused to produce anything. All of these people were, by the way, working with massive law firms. The county hired Shepherd Mullen, a white shoe big law firm. Meta hired Oric, and X Corp hired White and Case. And so it's just me from my house,
Well,
fighting.
you had your small children to help you. Come on, Julie.
Yes. Yeah, those were my
Plenty of
paralegals.
staff.
Yeah. And this was a
The
crowd
toddlers do
raised.
great research.
Yeah, this was a crowd raised lawsuit. So it was just so insane to watch the way that they operated and just buried me at every opportunity in paper and nonsense. And I just did my taxes last night and I took a massive loss last year. So that's, that's the reality of trying to fight the government.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I subpoenaed X. And the guy seems normal and reasonable at first, but then I realized he's stringing me along. I subpoenaed him, I don't know, 4
Well, he
months.
gets paid by the hour.
He does get paid by the hour.
Yeah.
So I subpoenaed X about 4 months before my opposition to the county's motion for summary judgment was due. If I lose that motion for summary judgment, I'm done. My case is over. I don't get to trial. So it's very important to have the evidence lined up so you can make these arguments in the opposition. Long story short, get to the night before my opposition is due. The guy still has not given me any documents. And he sends me this email and he goes, all right, we're ready to produce, but I need you to agree that if we send you anything confidential, that you'll file it under seal and you're not going to use any of this for anything outside of court. You're not going to post it on your website. I was like, okay. So he drops 20,000 pages of documents on me the night before my op is due. And I just stayed up all night. I furiously read through everything. I found a bunch of great information and very revealing information that I won't disclose because I don't want to get sued and I don't want you to get sued. And I said, okay, I'm going to put these into my opposition. You've marked 20,000 pages confidential.
Well, let's see. Julie, we may have lost a signal from Julie. Let's see if we get her back. Hopefully we will. There she is. It looks like I see her there now. Okay. You still with us?
I don't know what happened. I'm
I
here.
don't
Can
either.
you hear me?
It's California. It's Barbara Ferrer must be tinkering with your
yeah,
router.
no, it's Adam
Yeah.
Schiff.
She pulled the plug. Go ahead.
I mean, they watch all of my tweets and the case is now over. We're beyond trial, but they put in 300 pages of my tweets into court trying to gag me during the litigation. So they do. I'm sure one of them is watching. Hello. Anyway, so
I never once went to Twitter jail. I know you probably did, but back in those days, it never happened. I don't know how I managed to avoid Twitter jail.
I've never been in Twitter jail either.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you had. It's hard for me. We have so many friends of ours who get repeatedly thrown or were. I mean, it's not so much anymore, but they used to, at least like an everyday occurrence because you dared to disagree with the government. And that's what drove people like you, by the way, to be willing to go through 20,000 pages of discovery documents, the night before your response was due. And that, by the way, folks, is dedicated lawyering. And Julie, you really should be commended for that because, being a zealous advocate for your client is what really is the legal profession is all about. Who, by the way, were your clients in this litigation? Because I know that you were doing it out of, your own sense of righteousness. And I agree with you. It was the righteous cause, but who technically did you represent? Did you represent yourself?
No, it was the Alliance of Los Angeles County Parents. So it was an unincorporated association made up of parents of children in Los Angeles County who were subjected to the COVID mandates.
All right. I'm supposed to shut up and let Julie talk. I mean, you're more entertaining than me, so by all means, go ahead.
I love hearing you talk. I feel like your voice is like, I want you to join with the Calm app and do bedtime stories because I love listening to the way you talk.
Just how rednecks talk around here. Go ahead.
Oh, stop. So anyway, I reached back out to the lawyer for Twitter and I said, you've marked 20,000 pages of documents confidential, but they're obviously not confidential. They're communications from congressional staffers to Twitter. They're not in those discussions. They're not marking them confidential. They don't reveal any trade secrets. There's nothing secret. They're literally talking to the government. Are you serious? Like, I'm not gonna file these under seal. I'd have to make I would have to make a misrepresentation to the court in order to ask them to seal these documents. And to explain for the listeners, there is a First Amendment right and a presumption in favor of court documents being a public record available for the public to review. And if there's something in there that needs to be under seal because it would reveal confidential trade secret, or I can't remember what all of the factors are right now, but it's a high standard to meet to seal a court record. And I told this attorney, I said, these don't meet that standard. I'm not going to file a false declaration with the court in order to seal these. And frankly, the public needs to see what's in these documents. Because
here we're in the Atlanta area in Fulton County, filing false things with the court is just commonplace. I'm shocked to hear that in California that doesn't go on.
Oh, well, I will say that I won't. I have to be careful what I say because these people they actually do listen and follow everything that I'm doing. And I don't have the resources to defend myself against litigation from massive law firms. So anyway, the guy won't budge. I have to file these documents redacted. So I couldn't file with the court the full documents. And it made it very difficult to write my opposition, because if you write an opposition based on documents that are subject to these claims of confidentiality and have to be under seal, you have to jump through all of these hoops. And I was on a lake in Michigan in like this remote country town. And it was so ridiculous. All of the things I was trying to do in order to file this opposition and save the case. So anyway, I did it. I won. But I lost on this sealing application. And what really the most jarring and frightening thing that happened in this litigation is I found out that the lawyer for Twitter was working hand in glove with the lawyer for the government, for the county. And this man had been showing up to court for weeks, sitting in the gallery with this county lawyer. And the entire time I thought he was just county counsel. And we go to a hearing. I can't remember what it was for. And I'm at counsel table and the county attorney is here and something about X Twitter comes up and the judge says, "Is there an attorney in the room for X?"
So the judge knew that Twitter's lawyer was there, but you didn't know.
I didn't know.
And Twitter's lawyer and the county lawyer were, to borrow a phrase, colluding with one another.
Correct.
Okay.
And so this man sheepishly raises his hand.
Well, you know how to piss people off, I'll tell you.
Oh, man. So it was so disturbing to see that. And this is post Elon Twitter. This is X. And I don't think Elon knew that this was happening. But this man was working with the county's attorney, and they were working together to get a protective order and a motion to seal to keep all of these documents that were showing censorship efforts by the government to Twitter out of the public eye. Those documents are still under seal. I cannot talk about them and I can't share them with anybody unless somebody can move to unseal them. So there's a lot of stuff that America still doesn't know that hasn't been revealed in Murthy v. Missouri, wasn't revealed in my case. I would love it if Elon Musk found this and decided to unseal, because he could do that.
Okay, Elon, if you're watching, or if you ever watch or if anybody can get this to Elon, please tell your attorneys to unseal these documents, because inquiring minds want to know. And I think that sunshine is the best disinfectant in all things, but certainly in the legal system. So it sounds to me like you were having some issues and the judge may not have ruled your way. Did you have a jury trial? What happened basically to wrap this litigation up?
Okay. Sorry, I've gone far afield. There's so many things happened in this litigation. It was just such a wild ride. So I lose on the seal. What was really interesting is the county, I told you they filed 300 pages of my tweets, which were mostly criticism of the government and sharing updates on this case, which includes very critical information the public needs to know about. The county filed this in conjunction with X's attorneys, trying to argue for essentially a gag order. They didn't gag me, but they were trying. Anyway, then we get to summary judgment. I prevailed, thank God. The judge in that ruling said Murthy v. Missouri, or Missouri v. Biden at the time, is the standard to apply here. And that was a huge victory for me. So then we go to trial. We had a 4-day trial. No jury, because it was an issue of equity. We were not seeking damages. We were only seeking an injunction and declaratory relief. So there's no money involved. And for that reason, I'm not entitled to a jury trial. So we get to trial, and it was so much fun. I love trying cases. It was just me on the alliance side, and then the government side literally filled up the entire courtroom. It was like the entire gallery was filled with big law attorneys, county counsel, paralegals, tech people, all these ridiculous people. They had like stacks and stacks of boxes of documents. I had 2 binders for my exhibits. Had a great time, cross-examined Brett Morrow and Barbara Ferrer twice, asked them frequently about how they define misinformation, how they determine whether something is misinformation or not, and ultimately what they said.
Did she wear a mask when she was testifying?
She did wear a mask when she was testifying. She wore a mask the entire time.
I want to make sure she was keeping you safe. Go ahead.
Oh, but I had to run out very quickly after one of our sessions. And I run out of the courtroom real quick, open the door, and she's sitting there on the bench talking to her lawyer, no mask on. And then she sees me and she goes, she puts her mask on really fast.
The charade must go on.
So I get back in, and I waited till the very end because this judge was no nonsense. He would not let me. He was keeping us very much in line and would not let us stray whatsoever from the issues at hand. So one of my last questions to her was, you've been testifying this entire trial with your mask on, but when I stepped outside earlier, I saw you out there with your mask off. What's going on? And she said, I was taking a drink of water. I have a cold. I don't need to respond to you. I don't need to respond to your questions. She was so incredulous that I called her out on this. Absolute. So there's case law that actually says that in a court of law, I'm going to butcher this because I haven't seen it in a while, but you can require that someone testifying wear a clear mask, because a mask can be used to cover up a person's demeanor and interferes with the judge's ability to tell whether or not they are being honest or forthcoming. And she did that intentionally to cover up her, I'm not going to call her a liar, but I think that was something that she used to cover tells and things along those lines. Anyway, at trial, we essentially were arguing to show that there was significant encouragement and coercion along the lines of Murthy v. Missouri. We were also arguing that the county's decision to close off all of the public comments was the closure of a public forum for a viewpoint discriminatory purpose. Ultimately, the court found that we didn't reach the level of significant encouragement or coercion. I also was not allowed to bring in a lot of evidence. But the most troubling part of the decision was the court said that the government can close down a designated public forum for a viewpoint discriminatory purpose.
No, that's bullshit.
That's okay.
No, that's not okay. But okay, not okay with me anyway. But so the judge is making so you had no jury, and the judge. Are you telling me that the judge could not be counted on? The courts could not be relied on to protect the rights of the citizens of California to free speech?
I don't want to criticize the judge on a personal level. I think that
I just criticize his ruling, criticize his personal. I mean, because that's what he ruled, right? The judge ruled that they could trample on your free speech rights.
Right. Right. And at this point in time, we don't have clear authority from the United States Supreme Court on when there is a First Amendment violation in the context of the government pushing a private digital platform to take action with respect to someone's speech. We still don't have that from the Supreme Court. We have something from the Fifth Circuit that I love, but we don't have real clear analysis from the United States.
Well, I tell
Supreme
you,
Court.
look, I regret that you lost that case, but I'm very, very proud that you brought it. I think more people need to be willing to do that. And I know it was incredibly difficult for you being, basically practicing law part, you're a full-time mom, right? And you were doing this under the worst possible circumstances during the COVID-19. And you really should be commended for that. And
Thank
the
you.
bottom, so we can't count on judges, but, and we mentioned that we don't have guidance from the courts, but we do. I found some guidance from somebody named George Washington, who says that if men are to be precluded from offering their sentiments on a matter which may involve the most serious and alarming consequences that can invite the consideration of mankind, reason is of no use to us. The freedom of speech may be taken away, and dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. George Washington, first president of the United States. And, to me, I don't really understand why judges can't just wrap their brain around that. You don't need a bunch of rulings from the Supreme Court, in my opinion, to get this right. It's such a fundamental freedom that we all have, and the government just seems that it can just take it away because they want to, and because there's nobody's going to stop them. They have people like you willing to throw up barriers along the way, but judges so many times just refuse to do the right thing. There was a case here in Atlanta. It involved something very similar, and the judge simply said, "Those are great arguments, but I'm just going to defer to the CDC because, they're the experts on this." And so it's just so incredibly frustrating, to find judges that, in my opinion, just abrogate their responsibility to do the right thing.
Well, and that is exactly what happened to the first half of our lawsuit. Is that, remember, I talked about filing the petition for writ of mandate on the challenging the arbitrary and capricious public health mandate. That entire cause of action was kicked out on demurrer, which means the county filed a document that says, even if everything that the Alliance has said in its petition is true, we still win as a matter of law. The judge agreed and dismissed without leave to amend on the ground that the county's public health order was based on a CDC recommendation and therefore rational as a matter of law and could not be challenged. And so that I'm in the appeal process right now. And I think that's our strongest argument, that was clear error to rule in that manner. And essentially preclude anyone from ever challenging a local public health mandate. It's
well, you
insane.
You didn't know this. I've got a surprise for you. You didn't know this, but we snuck in some cameras into your trial, and we caught some of the testimony. And I want to share that now with our viewers here for the first time.
Man, can I get a water or something? I'm so high right now, y'all. I'm about to go to sleep on y'all now. I ain't gonna tell you no lie.
Yes, you may. We're gonna take a break soon. Hang in there.
All right. Well, that obviously wasn't from your trial. I don't know how that slipped in here, but I just couldn't resist. Look, I thank you for bringing this lawsuit, and I'm sorry. And by all means, go get them on that appeal. I certainly hope you take it to them. And let's move on. If you have a couple of minutes, I want to talk about some other things that are going on in California. I don't know if you've seen this, but I think, you're in Southern California. I think you're being invaded. So what's going on out here? This was apparently pretty recent, and this is the beaches of Southern California are being stormed. What's going on over there on the left coast?
These are panga boats, and this is a frequent occurrence on the coast of California. I live in Rancho Palos Verdes, so I actually can see the ocean from my house. I can see the lighthouse from my house. I'm so sorry. My dog needs to be let out. Can you give me 1 second here?
Go ahead. Let the dog
Sorry.
out and no, by all means. That was for those of you who haven't seen this. This was on you can find it. Well, that's something I posted this on Twitter, and so you can see the whole thing. It's almost 2 minutes long, so go check it out there. But this is in San Diego when I used to live there, so I recognized it, and it's just so incredible that that we have this kind of thing going on. Let's see, I forgot to share. Let's see, I want to share. How do I do this? I want to share this with you. There we go. This is where I put it on Twitter. You can see the whole thing, and it's almost like this is something that's intentional, something that the government is doing on purpose. And I don't understand it, but I was talking with Julie earlier, texting with her, and she said that she's seen this with her own eyes. So let's go ahead now. She's back. We'll go ahead and get. So you were telling us. And by the way, we're dog people here. We love dogs. So I'm glad you're able to let yours out. But anyway, what are we seeing here? What's going on?
Can you hear me? I just had to
Yeah.
disconnect
You're
my
great.
mic. Okay, good. Things are all the wheels are falling off the bus over here. So these are panga boats, and what happens is there's a lot going on. My kids are banging on my door. I'm so sorry. So you see what's going on in Texas. You see the border being fortified by the state of Texas. Thankfully, it's working. And I think what we're seeing is an increase in the panga boats whenever the land borders are becoming more fortified. And so people will get in these little boats. They're run by the cartels. They go out, and there's a very long New York Times article about this that was written, I don't know, 5 years ago. It's fascinating to read. I don't recommend New York Times, but this article is actually really good. Just Google New York Times panga boats. And so they go out in the middle of the night. They take off from the coast of Mexico. They go outside of like the Catalina Island sort of channel, and then they try to evade detection. The Coast Guard, I was just actually talking to Bill Malusian about this today, trying to get more information because he knows everything that's going on with the border. And he's saying that there hasn't really been a lot of Coast Guard enforcement lately, so I don't know what's going on. But previously, Coast Guard would be stationed in certain areas, but these people could evade detection, come out, and then come into shore. Usually they try to make it before it's daytime. So they try to make it when it's dark out so they are not detected. But obviously what you just saw in Carlsbad, which is a beach I've been to many times, and they almost ran over a surfer, which really bothers me. So they come in full speed, essentially abandon the boat. They all run up, get into the street, and then there are SUVs waiting for them. So this is all coordinated. These people are all working together. Often there is drug smuggling involved. It's obviously human smuggling. And in my city, when I was on the planning commission here, we were working on the Coast Guard to utilize the lighthouse space as a Coast Guard lookout point because they were coming ashore so frequently in Palos Verdes. And here it's very dangerous because we live up on a cliff And so these people are basically free soloing up our cliffs once they're jumping off of their panga boats, and then they're coming up and getting in these SUVs, and then they're in the country. So,
Well, so all right. So what do you think? And this is obviously we're onto a different topic than the First Amendment now, but it is related, I think, to the government and its attempt to sort of control people. Because look, I mean, I posted my on my Twitter feed, I posted that in my view this is intentional, and I really don't know any other way to describe it, because you have so much division that's being sown like purposely by the administration. I've got to ask myself why it they can't be this incompetent to just allow this to go on, under their noses and do nothing. So that leads me to believe it has to be intentional. And if it's intentional, the question is why. And you and I were talking some about this as well, and I'd love to hear more about your thoughts. But I mean, is there a reason, why the government would be, dividing the population the way that it is? Why is it's sowing these seeds of distrust? And it's just like everything that's being done is being done for the purpose of tearing down and destroying the very fabric of a cohesive society. So why would the government want to do that to the society that it supposedly serves?
are you trying to blackpill me right now, Phil?
Look,
I
I mean,
no, it's
really
it's very disturbing.
doing this.
So, I've spoken about this on Fox. I go on Trace Gallagher's show every week, and I watch a lot of Bill Melugin coverage of the border. And if you're not watching it, I strongly encourage you to do that, because he goes down to the border and shows you, with his cell phone, with their drone coverage, exactly what's happening. And it's shocking. And I didn't understand the reality of it until I started following him and seeing what was actually going on the ground. And what's happened in Texas is the most egregious, because not only is the US government not protecting the border or fortifying the border or keeping people out, they're actively interfering with Texas' ability to protect its border. And they're suing Texas, and they're trying to undo all of these steps that Texas has taken to protect its border. What is the point of a nation if you don't have a border and you don't have the right to exclude? I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's not a nation at all. I mean, the answer is it's not a nation. If you don't have a border, you don't have a country. So if you're the government that supposedly is there to accommodate and to serve the best interests of society as a whole, what would be the point in the government sort of helping to actively tear down that society? Which brings me to this, because, and I don't want to just pick on California, but it's so easy to do.
I know.
We have this today. Let's see here. This is, I found this on, and so buying a child for purposes of having sex with it is a misdemeanor in California. And for those of you who may not know, misdemeanors are the lower of the types of criminal charges, generally punishable by up to a maximum of 12 months and a $1,000 fine. Of course, the other end of the spectrum is, the felonies, which anything above 12 months. And so the news was reporting that this is a current debate that's going on in the legislature in and I'm like, what in the hell is there to debate? I mean, buying a child for purposes of having sex ought to be the death penalty. But certainly it can't be possibly be a misdemeanor. Am I reading something wrong? Why in the hell is it a misdemeanor now? And why are they not beating down the doors to change it to something more than a misdemeanor? I mean, I don't know that maybe that's a rhetorical question, but I hate to pick on California, but it just seems to me more of the same nonsense. It's almost like the government is trying to make this such a bizarre world to live in that we just all lose our minds.
Exactly. And there are theories that, with respect to the immigration issue, that there is an intentional, plan to try and boost voter numbers in certain areas. And I've seen evidence that actually sort of supports that theory. But with respect to what's going on in California, California needs to be picked on repeatedly and broadly and publicly, because a lot of the policies that start here end up spreading and they go national. And the Biden administration loves to adopt California's craziest policies. And one has to understand the composition of our state legislature to understand how we get to a point like this. It's a supermajority Democrat legislature. That means there are so many Democrats in our state assembly and in our state Senate that they can override a governor veto. So there's no balance. There's no listening. There's no debating. There's no common sense perspective that's allowed to be heard in our state legislature. Our governor is also a nut. So, I went up to Sacramento, which is our capital, twice in March, or once in February, once in March. And it was such a scary experience because everybody in there is an absolute nut job. These people they're living in this bubble of theory and academic ideas. Everything related to crime is racist and discriminatory. Therefore, we don't enforce crime anymore. Apparently, our jails and prisons are all empty because we don't imprison anyone anymore because it disproportionately harms marginalized communities. This is what these people actually believe. And I'm at a loss. I really don't, this is what I'm doing with the California Policy Center right now. This is why I've aligned with them. I'm starting a justice center so that we can fight back legally, because we can't get anywhere with policy in this state because it's so skewed to the left. We have absolute lunatics. And I can guess that probably the lead that's going to be opposed to increasing selling a child for sex to a felony is going to be Scott Wiener and his ilk, because he is in charge of all of these disgusting bills that lower the age of consent, that do all of this stuff with respect to children and sex in the name of anti-discrimination against the LGBT community. It's absolutely disgusting. Sorry, I just had.
Yeah. Look, I mean,
I
just when I
politics
saw that they were
are
having
beyond the pale.
when I saw they were having to debate the question, I'm like, what is there to debate? But why is it a misdemeanor now? How did it ever get to be a misdemeanor? And who in their right mind made it a misdemeanor? And whatever governor signed that law, and I don't know who it is. I'm sure people in the chat probably know, you might know, but whoever signed that law is a complete lunatic. And, look, all right, folks, we've been here an hour and a half. Julie, we've taken up enough of your Sunday. Thank you so much for coming in here. And I want to say thanks to everybody here in the chat. I've been watching the comments. It's very, very lively, very interesting discussion. A lot of people, Julie, are thinking that you are a hero, and I agree with them. What can anybody do to support your efforts there in California? Whoop.
I'm so sorry. I don't know if I'm cut out. Can you hear me?
I hear you now. I was saying, what can people do to support your efforts in California?
You can support the California Policy Center. And if you want to support this particular litigation and the appeal that I've been discussing, you can go to laparents.org/donate. That would be tremendously helpful, and that helps me to cover the cost of the appeal.
All right. Well, if you'll send me a link to that, I may already have it. I'll put it in the descriptive notes to this live stream when I can go back and edit it later. And by the way, please check out those notes, because there, folks, you'll find some additional links on how you can support this channel so we can continue to bring you great guests like Julie and great stories and great information. And we can keep talking about the things in the law that are good, that are bad, that maybe aren't so great, maybe that are sort of ugly sometimes, to try to hopefully make some positive difference in all of those things. Julie, thank you very much for coming in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. She may Anyway, we'll go
Thank you
ahead
for
and
having
say
me.
you. All right, you're welcome. Sounds like maybe Barbara Ferrer is outside sawing on your internet line as we speak. So I'll let you go go tend to her and run her off. Thank you so much for coming in here, and thanks to all of you guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you to chat boss Megan. I see that you're in there corralling the troops as usual. And thank you all for the super chats, and thank you for just being here. And with that, folks, I hope that all of you have a great rest of your weekend. And I hope that you will come back and see us here next time inside.